Notre Dame had not won a major postseason game in nearly 40 years. That streak, of course, ended last season when they won not one but two major postseason games, beating Georgia in the Sugar Bowl and then beating Penn State in the Orange Bowl before coming up a little bit short against Ohio State in the national championship game. There was also that loss early in the season in Northern Illinois at home, but I guess we don't need to talk about that. Can Notre Dame repeat their success from 2024? Can they take the next step and win it all this season, or will they come up short and miss the playoffs altogether? I'm going to let you know in today's video, because guess what? It's time for another prediction. Yeah, good morning. That is Uncle Lou here. That's right. It is me, Lustradamus, live on YouTube for you. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Also, in addition to that as well, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We're on the road to 75,000 subscribers. Shout out to everybody who has been along for the ride. We have a great time here. Become part of the community. Subscribe to the channel. Let's get to 75K by the end of this year. All right, we're going to talk about Notre Dame today. Of course, they did make the playoffs last year, won a couple of games. Won 3 games, actually, beat Indiana at home in a first round game, and then won the Sugar Bowl against Georgia, the Orange Bowl against Penn State, and then coming up short, like we mentioned, against Ohio State. So they're looking to keep the momentum going in 2025. Now, they got some key pieces from last year's team that are gone. They bring in some new pieces. They've got a ton of return and talent. They replace a defensive coordinator and a quarterback. They also have a fairly difficult first half of the schedule. Well, we'll put it this way. You can see the schedule over here on the screen. If you were going to, is the first half of the schedule more difficult than the second half? Yes, you see that there. The majority of their difficult games come in the first half of the season. How much is that going to be affected in that they have a brand new quarterback and a brand new defensive coordinator? We'll find out when we get to the prediction portion of the video. But let's take a look at Notre Dame for 2025. What might they look like? What they lose? Who's coming back? Now, it starts with quarterback, and they got a new one. Riley Leonard was the guy last year. Now, Riley Leonard was a little bit of a mixed bag, in my opinion. I don't think Riley Leonard was or is a great quarterback. He did what Notre Dame wanted him to do last year at a really high level, though. They've got a couple of really great running backs, which are back again this year, Love and Price. They had a really good offensive line last year, and Riley Leonard can run the ball. He's not a Lamar Jackson or even like a Jalen Milroe from last year, but, he's more in like the Tim Tebow style of running quarterback between the tackles. If it's 3rd and 4, I'm willing to bet Riley Leonard's going to find a way to get 5 yards and keep the drive alive, that kind of thing. Saw a lot of that in the end of the Sugar Bowl to kind of close that game out against Georgia, when Georgia just absolutely had to have a stop at the end of that game. They just could not stop Riley Leonard to 3, 4, 5 yards at a time type deal. So he had some areas he excelled in, and he had some areas I think he struggled at. I don't think he's a great passer of the football. But he did what Notre Dame asked him to do, and he did it at a high level, and we saw the results on the field last year, Notre Dame making it all the way to the national title game. So on one hand, you're losing an experienced veteran quarterback, right? And starting a kid, really, is the right word, a redshirt freshman here with literally zero stats. He wasn't even the backup last year. He was the 3rd string last year. The backup has transferred out. So literally, the guy has literally never played college football. Doesn't have any pass attempts, anything like that. But it is possible Notre Dame's offense, I think, can be better in 2025 than it was even in 2024 if they're able to develop the passing game some with the new quarterback, CJ Carr. And I think they will. Again, I was not impressed ever, going back to Riley Leonard's days at Duke, really with his ability to throw the ball. Now, Notre Dame's got a couple of really good wideouts. They brought in a couple of more really good wideouts through the portal. I think this might be Notre Dame's best wide receiver group in 10 or 15 years. I think this could be the best Notre Dame offense in 30 years. I think this could be a really, really good Notre Dame offense. A lot of it hinges on the play of CJ Carr and his ability to throw the ball, and some replacements that they need to make along the offensive line. But they recruit well under Marcus Freeman. He's proved to be a pretty good coach. Over on the defensive side of the ball, again, they lose an All-American safety, but they're just loaded. Even in the secondary, they might have the best corner duo in the country. I really like their front seven. They're really strong on the edge. They're deep at inside linebacker. It's hard to find a weakness defensively on Notre Dame, and I thought that was one of their strong points last year was their defense. It might be even better personnel-wise this year than it was last year. They are replacing a really good defensive coordinator, though, and you guys, if you've been around my channel for a while, you sort of know how I feel about changing out coordinators. Even if you are bringing in a really good coordinator, a lot of times it's that second year where you really kind of see the difference. There, a lot of times there are some growing pains in year one of a new coordinator. Doesn't mean that will happen with Notre Dame. It's just worth pointing out they do have a new defensive coordinator, and there could be a little bit of a learning curve there defensively heading into 2025. But I really like Notre Dame's roster. Those two, the two wide receivers, a great house in what was his name? Faison or Faison, Jordan Faison and Jaden Greathouse, the two wide receivers from last year. They also bring in Malachi Fields from Virginia, had almost 800 yards last year on a bad team. So you would think should be able to do pretty well here on Notre Dame. They bring in Will Pauling from Wisconsin. They bring a tight end in from Washington, several defensive players along the defensive line, a couple of safeties. So, not one of these teams that goes out and gets 30 or 40 players every year in the portal, because they don't have to. They recruit well enough to where they can use the portal kind of the way I think it should be used. Sort of assess your team at the end of every season, where some obvious either weaknesses or position groups where we don't have enough bodies, and let's go in the portal and get 4, 5, 6, 7 guys to sort of backfill what we have. That's what Notre Dame has done here. Steve Angeli, who was the backup last year, I mentioned, has transferred out to Syracuse, where he's expected to be the starting quarterback there. And that makes room for CJ Carr, a grandson of former Michigan head coach Lloyd Carr. So weird kind of connection there with the Notre Dame Michigan sort of semi-rivalry. I say semi because they don't play anymore, at least hardly ever do they play anymore, but I guess considered a rivalry for a long time. Notre Dame did go into the portal. We talked about that. Their offensive line depth could be a little bit of a problem. They lost 3, maybe not starters, but 3 players that had potential to play. Most teams are playing 7, 8, sometimes 9 offensive linemen a season now, whether it's because of injury, which happens almost every year to every single team somewhere along the offensive line, or whether it's just rotating guys in and out in different situations to get them some experience. They lost 3 guys to the portal who could potentially have contributed for them this year. The new defensive coordinator, we mentioned him, Chris Ash, comes in. Al Golden, I thought, did an amazing job defensively at Notre Dame. So Chris Ash has some big shoes to fill there, and several transfers as well on the defensive side of the ball, a couple of defensive linemen and some in the secondary. I think Notre Dame is loaded. I think this might be the best Notre Dame team since they won the national title in 1988. If CJ Carr can play at anywhere close to an average or slightly above average level of football in 2025, I think Notre Dame is one of a handful of teams that has a chance of potentially winning it all. And when I say a handful of teams, I'm talking 6, 7, 8 teams. If you were to, sort of force me right now to name 6, 7, 8 teams that I think have a really good shot of winning it all, Notre Dame would be in that group. If you can promise me that CJ Carr is going to play at an average or slightly above average a game. Now, the thing you have to worry about with CJ Carr is the same thing really that you worry about with any first-year starter, whether they're a freshman, redshirt freshman, or whatever. And it's kind of the boneheaded mistakes, making throws that maybe he shouldn't have tried to make, holding on to the ball too long and taking sacks, turnovers, things like that. These are the problems that I think Carr is going to have to avoid at that quarterback position, especially early in the season. Like I mentioned, again, you can take a look at the schedule over here. We're fixing to go through it. It's front-loaded. Whatever you think about Notre Dame's schedule, and there's opinions all over the board when it comes to Notre Dame in general, right? Whatever you think about their schedule, you have to agree that it's front-loaded in that if you were to rank the difficulty of these games from like 1 to 12, the majority of the more difficult games are in the front half of the season. And again, like I mentioned in the beginning, that could be an issue when you're trying to break in a new quarterback and a new defensive coordinator. We're going to find out here when we get to the prediction video, when we get to the prediction. What does Vegas think about Notre Dame? Now, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. Notre Dame could predict you to win a national title, or Vegas could predict you to win a national title and you could go winless. They could predict you to go winless and you could win a national title. But the Vegas odds are a pretty good indication of what the general public feels about a team heading into the season when you take a look at it. So we're going to look at the win total for Notre Dame. How many wins is Notre Dame expected to get this season in the regular season? Again, this is a regular season number, so it doesn't take into account any potential postseason games. This is looking at Notre Dame's 12-game regular season schedule and saying how many games should they win. The Vegas number is 10.5. Now, obviously, you can't win 10.5 games. This is a betting number. So people are betting over or under 10.5 wins for Notre Dame. So if you bet over, you're thinking 11-1, 12-0. If you bet under, you're thinking 10-2, 9-3, 8-4. You get the idea. Their expected win total, 10.5. What about winning a national title? Can Notre Dame take the next step and win it all in 2025? Well, the favorite entering the season is Texas. Right behind them is Georgia. They're tied with Ohio State. Then you've got Penn State, Alabama, Oregon, Clemson, and then Notre Dame. So what is that, 7th or 8th? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oregon at 6, 7, 8. Notre Dame with the 8th best odds to win the national title in 2025. And I'm going to be honest, I don't even normally do this, but look, I'm going to put this up on the screen if I can. Of course I can. There's nothing I can't do. There's nothing I don't know, too. When it comes to betting on futures and something that's happening in the future, like who's going to win the national title, it's not just about betting who you think has the best, betting on the team you think has the best chance to win it all. Okay. It's about value. Notre Dame at plus 1,400 seems ridiculous to me. This number should be higher or lower. It should be more in the 6 or 7 range, I think. 6 or 7. What this means, if you don't know, is if you bet $100 on Notre Dame to win it all, and they do, that $100 wins you $1,400. That's what that means. So the higher this number is, the worse your odds are, according to Vegas, to win the Natty. So you go up here to Texas. It's at plus 550. A lot of people are picking Texas to win it all, and maybe you want to bet on Texas to win it all. But from a value perspective, I think there's more value, return on your money, potential return on your money at betting Notre Dame at plus 1,400 than there is on betting Texas at plus 550 for a couple of different reasons. Texas plays in the SEC. There's a chance they don't even make the playoffs, whereas Notre Dame, I think, is almost a shoe-in to get there. Anyway, I don't normally get into all that on these videos, so let's just move on. But I think Notre Dame is a good value bet at plus 1,400 to win it all. Is Notre Dame my pick to win it all? No. But again, for betting purposes, that's a pretty good bet to take Notre Dame at plus 1,400. All right, let's go through the schedule game by game. I'm going to give you a winner and a loser for every single week. All right, here we go. Here's the schedule. Now, they start off with a tough game here, especially in a season where you're trying to break in a brand new quarterback on the road at Miami. And again, whatever you think about Miami, and they haven't been great for the last 20 plus years. They've been in the ACC for over 20 years now. They've never won it. They've only got a handful of bowl wins in the last few years. They've never made the playoffs. They seem to keep bumping their head on the glass ceiling around 9 or 10 wins and unable to really move past that in terms of any sort of ACC championship playoff appearances. They were really close last year, really close. They lost that game. They lost 2 games in the last 3 weeks of the season, 4 weeks of the season, whatever it was, to play themselves out, right? They had 1 loss heading into November. They lost to Georgia Tech, and then they lost to Syracuse, and next thing you know, that's it. No playoffs for Miami. They played themselves out of it. Didn't even make the ACC championship game. Now, they think this year they're better and that they have an even better chance of making the ACC championship game or getting into the playoffs. Notre Dame, of course, feels the same way. Miami also has a new quarterback this year, but one with a ton of experience, Georgia quarterback Carson Beck, who did not play against Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl, of course, because he got injured in the SEC championship game against Texas. So it's going to be a really good game here. I've already done a Miami version of this video. In fact, I've done Miami already. I've done Southern Cal already. Who else have I done that's on here? I've done several of these teams already. So you know which direction I'm going maybe on a couple of these games here. Let me point something out before we get to the actual predictions. Notre Dame has lost a home game every single year since COVID. The COVID season was the last time Notre Dame did not lose a home game. In 3 of those years, they lost to group of 5 teams at home. In 2021, they lost to Cincinnati. at home. Cincinnati was still a group of 5 team at that point. They're just recently joined the Big 12 and became now a Power 4 team. So 2021, they lose to a group of 5 team at home. 2022, they lose to Ohio State at home, Power 5 team. Not an embarrassing loss. Ohio State was a good team in 2022. 2023, they lose at home to Marshall. 2024, last year, of course, they lost at home to Northern Illinois. This is a pattern they got to reverse. You don't want to be losing games at all to group of 5 teams, but to have lost to 3 group of 5 teams at home in the last 4 years, that's humiliating. And this is a pattern that goes back to Brian Kelly and has moved on now with Marcus Freeman. Marcus Freeman's been there. How many years Marcus Freeman been there now? 3? He's been there 3 years. He's got a home loss to, or has he been there 2? Anyway, so they lose a home game every single year. We can go back through it here real quick. So last year, 2024, of course, they lost at home to Northern Illinois. If you go back to 2023, the year before that, they lost at home to, that was the year they lost to Ohio State. I'm sorry, 2023, not 2022. Lost at home to Ohio State in 2023. 2022, which was Marcus Freeman's first year, they lost at home to Marshall. That's embarrassing. That's hard to fathom there. 2021, which was Brian Kelly's last year, that's the year they lost at home to Cincinnati. So 4 straight years they've lost a home game. 3 of those years it was to a group of 5 team. Let's keep that in mind as we move ahead now into the 2025 season for Notre Dame. But of course, the first game of the year is on the road at Miami, not a home game, not a group of 5 team. Again, I've done the Miami version of this video already, and I think Notre Dame goes down and wins this game. I am not a buyer in Miami's defense at this point until I see it. It was so bad last year, I couldn't believe it. It's probably the worst Miami defense in 25 years. I don't recall ever seeing a Miami defense that was that bad. I had to wipe my eyes every time I was watching. I thought it was a Lincoln Riley coach team. That's how bad the defense was. They had Cam Ward, who was a Heisman caliber type QB and led one of the best offenses in Miami football history. And it still wasn't enough. Not even to win the ACC or get into the playoff, never mind win it all. They bring Carson Beck in, and I think Carson Beck has got some talent. He's coming off an injury, so we'll see how that goes. But he's not Cam Ward. I just don't know if that defense can improve enough in 1 year to win a game of this magnitude. I'm actually taking Notre Dame to go on the road and win in week 1 at Miami. They're 1-0. Now, a bye week here is ridiculous. You don't want to see that. This is way too early in the season to be having a bye week. You'd rather have these things spread out, especially when you get 2 of them. You'd rather have these things spread out a little more, but nevertheless, Notre Dame gets a bye week in week 2. And then they play a home game against Texas A&M. This was a pretty good game last year, a game Notre Dame won on the road in College Station. It was Mike Elko's first game as head coach down there. Texas A&M went on to have a pretty good year. Of course, they went 8-4 like they always do, kind of the old joke about, calling them Texas 8-4. But heading into the last game of the regular season, Texas A&M had a chance to make the SEC championship game. All they needed to do was beat Texas. Now, it was easier said than done, of course, and they did not win that game. They lost at home to Texas. But they ended up being a pretty good team. And Mike Elko's a good coach. You look at what he did at Duke before taking the job at Texas A&M. And Texas A&M lost a ton of talent. When Jimbo Fisher was fired and Mike Elko was brought in, as a lot of players hit the portal. We didn't really know what to expect last year from a Mike Elko Texas A&M team. They had a couple of quarterback changes during the year, some quarterback hokey pokey type situations going on. They've got that position settled now. I think Notre Dame loses this game at home to Texas A&M. Now, before you get all mad and pissed off in the comments section, I've been extremely complimentary of Notre Dame for 100% of this video up to this point. And we saw last year, whether you want to talk about Notre Dame losing to Northern Illinois, Ohio State lost 2 regular season games. And your national title game ended up being Ohio State, a 2-loss regular season team, versus Notre Dame, a team that lost to a group of 5 team at home in the regular season. This isn't the college football of 20 years ago, where a loss, particularly a loss early in the season, sort of means it's over, you got no chance to do anything. I think Notre Dame loses at home to Texas A&M. I think they're going to be a pretty good team. I think Texas A&M could be a surprise team in the SEC, potentially making the SEC championship game this year. The good news is you get to play Purdue the following week, and they're worse than most of the group of 5 teams in the country. They're absolutely horrible. Notre Dame will absolutely steamroll Purdue. They're 2-1. Then you go on the road and play Arkansas. Arkansas's quarterback's getting a lot of hype. Well, I'm drawing a blank on his name now. He's a transfer from Boise State. But anyway, I don't think he's that good. I don't think, well, Arkansas's not that good in general. I like Sam Pittman. Everybody likes Sam Pittman. That's kind of the problem. When people start talking about what a nice guy your coach is and how great of a person he is and all that, that's usually a sign they're not winning enough football games. People don't usually talk about whether a head coach is nice or not unless they're doing really bad. And unfortunately for Sam Pittman, who, again, like everybody else, I really like Sam Pittman. Things are not going well for him at Arkansas. It's on the road. So I guess, weird things happen maybe, I guess, but I just don't see Arkansas winning this game. I think Notre Dame goes on the road and wins relatively easily in Fayetteville. Still just the one loss. Then they come back home and play Boise State. Now, this is an interesting game. Boise State made the playoffs last year. Ashton Genty, though, gone off to the NFL. And he was a significant part, obviously, of Boise State's success last season. Not only do I think Notre Dame wins this game at home against Boise State, I do not think this will be anywhere close to Boise State's only loss. I don't think Boise State is making the playoffs this year. I don't even think Boise State is winning their conference this year. Spoiler alert. It'll be the team that they beat in their conference championship game last year. That's who's making the playoffs from the group of 5 in 2025. That'll be our secret for now. Shh, don't tell anybody. But that's, if you know who that is, if you know who Boise State beat in their conference championship game last year, that's who's making the playoffs this year. Yeah, you already know. And it's going to drive the Florida fans up the damn wall, which I am looking forward to, I must admit. Another home game after that against ACC opponent NC State. This is another train that I have jumped off of. I am no longer on the Dave Duran support system or whatever you want to call it. This guy does nothing but disappoint every single time NC State has any kind of expectation at all. I'm completely off the Dave Duran train. I do not think NC State is beating Notre Dame at Notre Dame. And then Southern Cal. Now, this is probably the first game. You could lose the Miami game, I guess. I've got you winning that one. You could win the Texas A&M game. I've got you losing that one. Purdue, Arkansas, Boise State, NC State. To me, those are 4 pretty easy W's for Notre Dame. This is the next game on the schedule where I think it gets tricky and could potentially be a loss. Now, I'm not high on Lincoln Riley. Again, if you've been around here any amount of time, that's probably not a surprise for you to hear me say that. And this is another team where, kind of like Miami in week 1, I don't really care anymore what Lincoln Riley is saying in the offseason, what he's telling us about the changes he made defensively and focusing more on strength and conditioning, or we did this in the weight room, or we changed our practice routine to this to emphasize more defensive situations, and we brought these coaches in. We've heard this all before from Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley's been a head coach for 9 years at 2 of the most prestigious programs in all of college football, Oklahoma and Southern Cal. And in all 9 of those years, his defense has been an absolute yard turd. I mean, it's not been bad. It's been horrible every year. And it's the same problems over multiple defensive coordinators. Players out of position. Players can't tackle. Can't get to the quarterback on 3rd down. Can't cover the receivers on key 3rd downs. Wide receivers running wide open in the secondary. It's just mind-boggling that a defense under the same head coach can be that bad for that many years in a row. The game's at Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame beats Southern Cal. Okay, it's still just the 1 loss. On the road at Boston College, again, an easy win for Notre Dame. I mean, you get a bye week, so there's no sort of risk, I wouldn't think, of maybe celebrating the Southern Cal win and getting caught sort of napping the following week against a bad team on the road, because you get bye week. Yeah, at Boston College should win that one. Back home against Navy. I mean, if last year didn't show people anything, I don't know what you're looking at. But these teams that 6-0, 7-0, 8-0, they don't even belong on the same field with legitimate power college football teams. Notre Dame will blow Navy out. On the road at Pitt, again, when you look at Notre Dame's draw from the ACC this year, Notre Dame plays 5 teams a year from the ACC. Well, they have to play at least 5. Some years they play more, but they're contractually obligated to play 5 teams from the ACC. They only play 1 of the top 5 teams in terms of preseason odds. They play Miami, and I think Miami's got the second best odds, maybe the third to win the ACC. But when you look at the rest of the top 5 teams in the ACC, you're talking about Clemson, Louisville, SMU, and Georgia Tech. Notre Dame doesn't play any of those. They basically play the worst 5 or 6 teams in the ACC. Again, this isn't Notre Dame's fault. They don't schedule their own ACC opponents. It's scheduled by the ACC. It's on a rotation. So I'm not throwing shade at Notre Dame. They got a favorable schedule this year in terms of how it lines up for their ACC portion of the schedule. So they should win at Pitt. Syracuse is another potentially interesting game. Now, you get it at home, so again, that's great. And Fran Brown had Syracuse rolling last year, 9-3, but they lost a lot off of last year's team. They're very heavy in the portal, and I'm always a little hesitant to sort of support a team who, number one, has sort of one good year, and that's it. I like to see teams be consistently good before I sort of trust them to do it year to year. And also, because of the amount of turnover in the portal, that's another thing I look at and I go, I don't know if I trust that, combined with a second-year head coach. So I think Notre Dame gets to win over Syracuse at home, although I will say when it comes to the back half of the schedule, I think that Syracuse game is probably the most tricky. And then you close out the regular season with a home game against one of the worst Power 4 teams in the country, not named Purdue, who you played earlier in the year. Stanford. You do have to play them on the road, trip to the West Coast, but Stanford's horrible. I mean, it should be an easy win for Notre Dame. I see Notre Dame at 11-1 again this season. I think their loss this year to Texas A&M is a better loss than last year's loss to Northern Illinois. And I think Notre Dame makes their second straight trip to the playoffs and potentially gets a bye this time because they have done away with sort of the automatic conference winner bye deal. I'm not going to get into explaining the playoffs in this video, but last year, the only way to get a bye was to win a conference. This year, that's not the case. So it's possible if Notre Dame finishes in the top 4 to playoff rankings to get a bye this year. If not, for some reason they don't finish in the top 4, they'd be 5 through 8, and I think would host another first round playoff game. But I think Notre Dame is headed back to the postseason in 2025. Again, a lot depends on quarterback CJ Carr and how quick he can sort of get rolling early in the season and avoid mistakes against a schedule that is front loaded. Again, Miami, Texas A&M, Arkansas, Boise State, and Southern Cal all in the first half of the season. Those are all losable games. I'm giving Notre Dame a lot of benefit of the doubt here. I mean, these are all games that if Notre Dame lost, you'd go, well, it's not a terrible loss. I tell you this, all of those teams are better than Northern Illinois. I mean, that's for sure. So I don't want to hear anything from Notre Dame fans about how, oh my God, I can't believe you have us losing to Texas A&M, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. And if you're going to get mad because I've got you at 11-1, with a loss to Texas A&M, then fine. I changed my mind. You're going 7-5 with losses to Miami, Texas A&M, Arkansas, Boise State, and Southern Cal. Have a great day. Just kidding. You're going 11-1. Have a great day.